With the trade deadline now just 3 days away, what moves do the Phillies need to make to bolster their roster for a playoff push? Also, after a shaky start to the second half, the Phils have gotten back on track, winning 4 of their last 5, getting contributions up and down the lineup. This MLB Trade Deadline edition of the Philly Sports Spot YouTube channel starts right now. What's going on, everybody, and welcome into this edition of the Philly Sports Spot YouTube channel. I am your host, Jordan Hirsch, and guys, before we get into this video, please make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel with notifications turned on so you never miss another upload. And make sure you also follow me on Instagram. The link will be in the description below. So guys, let's get right into talking about the MLB Trade Deadline, which is now just 3 days away. Yes, the trade deadline is Tuesday, August 2nd at 6 p.m., and the Phillies certainly have some needs to fill before that August 2nd deadline. I think most notably, probably starting pitching. Dave Dombrowski touched on this a little earlier this week, basically just mentioning the Phillies are going to be looking for an extra starting pitcher with Zach Eflin potentially on the shelf for the rest of this season. And there is a good amount of starting pitching depth out there. I'm sure the Phillies probably are not really looking into those top-tier starting pitchers. Of course, Luis Castillo came off the board last night as the Seattle Mariners traded away 3 of their top 5 prospects, including their number 1 overall prospect in Noelvi Marte, to get Luis Castillo. I mean, that basically just proves that the Phillies really never had a chance at going after him. It also probably proves they really don't have a chance going after Frankie Montas from the Oakland Athletics, considering that Luis Castillo and Frankie Montas have kind of been ranked as pretty similar players throughout this entire season, and I'm sure Oakland's going to be looking for some top-tier prospects as well. The Phillies just don't have that farm system depth. So if you look a little bit down the order of top starting pitchers that will probably be dealt before that August 2nd, 6 p.m. deadline, you start to look into guys like maybe Tyler Mahle or Zach Plesac. Noah Cindergaard's name has also popped up in there, and it's also been noted that the Cleveland Guardians may be interested in trading away Shane Bieber, who just won the AL Cy Young in 2020. So I want to take a look at all of these guys that I just mentioned, because the Phillies do certainly need that extra starting pitcher, and one of these guys could certainly fill that role. So let's take a look at Tyler Mahle, who's a right-handed pitcher from the Cincinnati Reds this season. He's 4-7 with a 4.48 ERA. He struck out 107 over 98 in a third-inning pitch, so he will strike you out. He's got a 1.27 whip, so maybe not the best numbers out of some of these guys, but certainly a player to keep their eye on. The Phillies went after Kyle Gibson, of course, last season. He had much better numbers than this, but I think right now anything along this caliber would be pretty even, or probably even a little bit better than Bailey Falter, who did pitch really well last night, but of course he has struggled a lot this season. Another guy that the Phillies have been looking into is Noah Syndergaard from the Los Angeles Angels, another right-handed pitcher again. This guy was obviously electric when he was with the Mets. Some injuries have set his career back this season. He is 5-8 with a 3.83 ERA. That is improved. He has pitched much better recently. He struck out 64 in 80 innings pitched, and his whip is down to 1.21. He really struggled out of the gate this season, and Syndergaard has gotten back on track. It looks like he's been pitching more like the Noah Syndergaard of old, so he might be a guy that the Phillies really could look into bringing in, just because he has been hot. And sometimes that's what you're looking for when you're trading for pitchers at the deadline. It's not necessarily the best pitcher, it's the best pitcher right now, and Noah Syndergaard certainly has been really good recently. Another pitcher the Phillies have been reportedly interested in and have looked into is Guardians right-handed pitcher Zach Plesac. This one is a little bit more shaky. I mean, the Guardians are not a bad team, and he is 2-8 with a 4.09 ERA, so you can't really look at that and say, oh, he's not getting run support. He's on a team that right now is also in the mix for that final AL wildcard spot. He's only struck out 72 in 99 innings. The whip is at 1.26. So Zach Plesac, I mean, he was the first name, I think, that we kind of all saw yesterday, basically saying that the Phillies have been linked to him. I really don't think that Zach Plesac really is the answer. Again, he's probably better than Bailey Falter, but with some of the other pitching that is out there on the market right now, I just don't see Zach Plesac as a guy that the Phillies really should be looking into bringing in. Shane Bieber probably is, though, another pitcher from the Cleveland Guardians. Again, he's coming off just 2 years ago winning the AL Cy Young, and again, the Guardians are in the mix for that final AL wildcard spot, but it has been reported by MLB Network that the Guardians may look to move Shane Bieber. Now, he may require a little bit more in the way of prospect from teams. The Phillies don't really have that many prospects down in their farm system, at least prospects that they'd be willing to trade. Logan O'Hoppe, obviously, I think he's really untouchable unless the Phillies are really going after a big-name player. So let's take a look at Shane Bieber. He's 5-6 with a 3.41 ERA. He struck out 118 and 118 2/3 innings pitch. Another guy that will strike you out. The whip is at 1.14. This is a guy that I'm sure most, if not every team, would love to have in their roster. I just don't know if the Phillies have the minor league depth in order to go out and trade for this guy. I think somebody like the Tyler Mahle, Noah Cindergaard, Zach Plesac, somebody in that range is probably a little bit more likely for the Phillies to get. So yes, but Shane Bieber, again, would be an excellent player to have. I just don't really see it happening. And one final starter that the Phillies probably should be looking into is the guy who just pitched against them last night, that being Jose Quintana of the Pirates. He went 5 2/3 last night of scoreless baseball. The Phillies obviously came back against Pittsburgh's bullpen, but Jose Quintana looked really good. He mixes pitches very well last night. He's not a guy that will overpower you. We saw last night his fastball was about 91 to 93, but he will change speeds on you. He'll throw that curveball a lot. He'll throw his curveball about actually 30% of the time, and he'll try to pitch you by basically just getting ahead and trying to put you away with that breaking stuff, trying to get you to chase. The curveball sat about 78 to 80 last night. He looked really good. He looked like a guy that the Phillies really should be looking into bringing in. Again, another left-handed pitcher that I'm sure would benefit this rotation greatly. Right now, they only have, they have Suarez and Falter, obviously, as their two lefties, but I just don't see, obviously, Falter being the answer. So it'd be nice if they could bring in Quintana as well and really have that nice, even mix, 2 lefties, 3 righties. So let's take a look at Jose Quintana's stats. This season, he's 3-5. He dropped his ERA yesterday down to 3.50. He won't strike you out as much as some of the other guys. 89 strikeouts and 103 innings pitched. He's not really a strikeout pitcher. He's more of a finesse guy. So that 89 and 103 actually isn't that bad for him. The whip is a little high at 1.27. But again, we saw what he can do last night, and against a pretty potent Phillies lineup, he was able to shut them down for 5 2/3. And against some of the teams that he would probably be asked to face if he was a member of the Phillies, like the Mets, the Braves, some of these really good teams that we have obviously coming up that we're going to need to win games against over these last 2 months of the season. I think it really would be nice to have a pitcher like Quintana that will mix speeds on you, and he is kind of like Ranger Suarez, so he'll mix those speeds. He's not really a strikeout guy. He's trying to get ground balls. He's trying to get you to get weak contact. So as long as the Phillies really would play good defense behind him, I think Jose Quintana could be really successful in the red pinstripes. It has also been noted the Phillies are interested in acquiring some center field depth, and I think it's definitely a good thing. I don't think Vierling and Odubel really are the answer right now in center field. Of course, one of the center fielders that I'm sure that the Phillies were probably looking at came off the board a few days ago with Andrew Benintendi getting traded to the Yankees for 3 prospects. So he comes off the board. And there aren't a ton of center fielders out there that I think teams are going to be looking to trade for, or at least a ton of outfielders really in general. I mean, you look at, there are really some top tier guys. Maybe the Orioles are going to try to move Cedric Mullins. I don't think that the Orioles should do that, considering the fact that they're right now in the mix for that AL wildcard spot. They're 2 games over 500. And it would shock me if they looked to trade Mullins. So you look at some of the teams that are out of it, and one of those teams being the Chicago Cubs and Ian Happ, who of course we just saw last weekend. I think he would be a really good fit here in Philly. He's hitting .284 this season with 9 homers, 46 RBIs. He's not really the power guy that he was a few years ago, but again, his OPS is up at 810 right now. He scored 45 runs, 99 hits. So a guy that I think would definitely be better than Vierling and Odubel, and it is a switch hitting bat, so he would be able to play a lot and against everybody, and it also would justify probably giving Odubel much less playing time, if not even trading him. because you could have the switch hitter in Ian Happ. He's a much better left-handed hitter than he is right-handed. So if you did want to kind of platoon him and Veerling, that would make sense. And of course, then it wouldn't make sense to just keep Odubel on the roster and have those 3 outfielders, especially if he's not going to get much playing time. Another guy that could come over in a potential Ian Happ deal between the Phillies and the Cubs is right-handed reliever Scott Effross. He has been really good for Chicago this season, and I do think that if the Phillies are going to go look to require a relief pitcher, it's going to be more of a middle relief guy like Effross. I don't think they really need much help at the back end of their bullpen, just considering how good Dominguez has been, how good Brad Hand has been, how good Connor Brogdon has been, Jose Alvarado recently as well. So I really think they're going to be looking maybe for some middle relief pitching, and I mean, that's not to say Nick Nelson or Andrew Bellotti have done a bad job this season. They've been really good. I just think they may, if they're going to go the way of a reliever, they'll probably look to upgrade that middle relief just a little bit more. And I think Scott Effross would really fit that bill. He's 1-4, but again, you can't really look at relief pitchers' records. But he's got a 2.66 ERA in 47 games. He's pitched 44 innings. He struck out 50, so he will punch your ticket. His whip is at 1.07. Again, he has been fantastic for the Cubs, and I think if the Phillies do look to bring in maybe a guy like Ian Happ, Scott Effross could be a part of this deal, especially if the Phillies potentially do give up some prospect talent. Maybe they'll give up Logan O'Hoppe to try to get these two guys. I don't know. They really don't have that much depth in the minor leagues, so Logan O'Hoppe probably will be a valuable trade candidate. Some other trade candidates that the Phillies may look to use, including O'Hoppe. So you got Rafael Marchand as well, another catcher the Phillies have in the minor leagues. Of course, he had some major league playing time last season. I think they'll only deal Marchand if they view O'Hoppe as unmovable, just because you won't really need that extra catcher down in the minors. I mean, you've got JT obviously for a long time. Garrett Stubbs has played really well, and I really think you only need one big catching prospect down in the minors if you've got 2 legitimate guys up with your major league team. Mickey Moniak, of course, is another guy that the Phillies may look to move. I just don't see him getting a ton of playing time with the Phillies really at all right now, just because you've got Veerling and Odubel that have kind of solidified that center field role recently, and if the Phillies do look to bring in another center fielder, there just won't be any place for Matt Veerling or for Mickey Moniak on this roster. If the Phillies do look to move some major league talent, I think Didi Gregorius is probably the first name that comes to mind. His contract is up at the end of the season. Of course, the Phillies have Bryson Stott, who I'm sure they view as their shortstop of the future or second baseman of the future. And if you really see him as that guy who's going to be up the middle for you guys for a long time, I just don't see any need to have to re-sign Didi Gregorius. And he could be a valuable trade candidate because he does have all that major league experience, and he could help bring in a pretty high-level guy. A couple other major league players the Phillies may look to move are Jeurys Familia. Of course, he has not been what the Phillies probably expected him to be this season. He just had that awful outing on Thursday night that allowed the Phillies to almost blow that game against Pittsburgh. They won that game 8-7. Fortunately, they needed every one of those 8 runs to pull that one out. So Familia could be a guy that could be traded. Odubel, same thing. As I mentioned, if they do look to bring in a center fielder, I just don't see any room for Odubel Herrera on this roster. The Phillies obviously then could look to move maybe some lower-end minor league players. This is basically other parts of a deal probably surrounding a bigger player like maybe O'Hoppe or Gregorius or Familia or somebody along that line. And finally, one other trade deadline note that really could affect the Phillies at the August 2nd deadline is the Nationals, of course, looking to move Juan Soto. It was reported that the 4 teams that were mainly in on Soto are the Dodgers, Padres, Mariners, and the Cardinals. Of course, the Mariners just traded away 3 of their top 5 prospects to get Castillo, so they're out on Soto. So that brings it down to the Dodgers, Padres, and Cardinals. And please, Dodgers or Padres, do whatever you can to not let Juan Soto go to St. Louis. Of course, the Phillies right now tied with the Cardinals for that final wildcard spot in the National League. And boy, would it just be a huge blow if the Nationals went out and traded for Juan Soto. They certainly have the prospects to do it. They've got some real good minor league talent, of course. Mason Wynn down there in the minors, and then some really high-level rookies, Matthew Liberatore, Nolan Gorman, and of course, and they may even be looking to move some non-rookie Major League talent Dylan Carlson's name has popped up as well. So they certainly have the major and minor league talent to make a Juan Soto trade, do the Cardinals. The reports were that they were also in on Luis Castillo. Of course, they miss out on him. So if they're looking for a top level pitcher, so that basically boils it down to just Frankie Montas. So if the Cardinals miss out on Frankie Montas as well, they may focus all their energy on trading for Juan Soto, and we cannot let that happen. We need the Dodgers or Padres to do something. Of course, those two teams have a ton of prospects too that they could easily move in a Juan Soto deal. The only thing that scares me about that a little bit is it has been reported that San Diego right now is the front runner, but also it's been reported that the Padres have been calling the Angels about the availability of one Shohei Ohtani, and if they decide to take that route, I mean, that may just leave it down to the Dodgers and Cardinals for Juan Soto if the Padres really become serious about trying to trade for Ohtani. And again, we cannot let Juan Soto go to St. Louis. I mean, that would just be awful. I think that would easily make the Cardinals the favorite to get that last wild card spot, and I think at that point you just hope that St. Louis maybe starts to gain some ground and move ahead of the Brewers in the NL Central, and the Phillies try to track them down. And finally, before we move into the Phillies week in review, yesterday on my Instagram I did ask you guys to send in some Phillies mock trade/trade predictions, and you guys did send in some good ones. I'll start it out with the first one that I got was trading potentially Didi Gregorius and Mickey Moniak to Boston for Xander Bogaerts. I mean, I don't think that would be enough to trade for Bogaerts. I mean, that would be, I think the Phillies, that would have to be basically a package deal where it would basically be Didi Gregorius, Mickey Moniak, and then some other prospects. But Boston also has made it known to teams that they are not looking to move Bogaerts, so it really would take a deal that swept them off their feet, I think, for the Red Sox to consider moving Bogaerts. And another one would be to trade Logan O'Hoppe for some relief pitching. Again, I don't think that the Phillies are going to go after some top-tier relief pitching, some back-end guys, and I think that they would really only trade Logan O'Hoppe in a major deal. So again, I think maybe Logan O'Hoppe may be centered around a trade in which a bullpen piece is a part of it, like a potential Ian Happ, Scott Efros deal, but I don't see a straight-up Logan O'Hoppe for a relief pitcher deal in the cards. Alright, switching gears a little bit now into the Phillies week in review. The Phillies, of course, started out the second half struggling. They got swept by the Chicago Cubs, but they did a really good job of putting that in the rearview mirror, winning 4 of their next 5 games with contributions from everybody up and down the lineup this week. Of course, Bryson Stott with the big 3-run home run on Monday night to propel the Phillies to that 6-4 win against Atlanta. Phillies then lost the next game in that series to the Braves by a final score of 6-3. Phillies then bounced right back, won 7-2 against Atlanta on Wednesday, so they take that series, winning 2 out of 3 against the Braves. And that game was just a huge game, I think, for the Phillies, just because they started out that game really struggling. Charlie Morton was really shutting them down, and then they had that big 5th inning in which they scored 5 runs. Contributions from Odubel in that game. Alec Boehm, who has been white hot, he leads baseball in average in the month of July, hitting around .430. He has just been on fire for the Phillies. JT Realmuto had a big 2-run single in that 5th inning. Realmuto has been on fire as well. He's hitting around .400 in his last 10 games, and if he's starting to turn around, boy, he could be a huge help to this Phillies lineup. Phillies then traveled west to take on the Pittsburgh Pirates. And they've won the first 2 games of that series, winning 8-7 on Thursday night in a game that, quite frankly, should not have been 8-7. The Phillies led 8-0 that game and 8-2 going into the 9th inning. Jerry's Familia nearly blowing that one, but Sir Anthony Dominguez fortunately comes in and shuts it down. So Phillies win that one 8-7. Phillies then basically have another game pretty similar to that one. On Wednesday, they have that one last night, winning 4-2 in 10 innings against the Pirates. Jose Quintana shuts the Phillies down for 5 2/3, but the Phillies score off of the Pirates bullpen late. Some big hitting by Kyle Schwarber, and how about Rhys Hoskins last night, who went 4 for 4 with 3 RBIs. But a big 7th inning, Phillies scored 2 runs there with a Kyle Schwarber RBI single, a Rhys Hoskins RBI single that ties the game, and then a Rhys Hoskins 2-run home run in the 10th inning gives the Phillies a 4-2 lead, and they win the game by that score. So all in all, a pretty good week for the Phillies, and they look like they have the makings of getting hot again right now, and that would just be an absolutely huge help to their playoff hopes. They don't play the best opponents coming up. They have these 2 games coming up against the Pirates to finish off that series in Pittsburgh. They then head down to Atlanta for 2, but then they have a 4-game series at home against Washington and a 3-game series at home against Miami. So if they are looking to get hot, this is the time to do it when you're not facing maybe the top quality opponents. Rob Thompson has said that the Phillies are not going to overlook anybody, and that is exactly how you should play. The Phillies should not be overlooking any team because all these teams are major league teams, and we saw last season that the Phillies are vulnerable to losing the teams that, quite frankly, they should not be losing to. I mean, that was a huge hindrance to their playoff chances last season, all those games in September that they should have won against the lower quality opponents that they did not. So it's good to see that the Phillies are not overlooking anybody right now. Another player that had a really good week this week for the Phillies is one Nick Castellanos. Of course, we all know about his struggles this entire season. He had a little run-in with Jim Salisbury Saturday night after that game against Chicago, and he was booed pretty relentlessly on Saturday and then again on Sunday. But since then, he has played really well. He's had back-to-back multi-hit games now. He had 3 hits on Thursday night, 2 hits again last night, so hopefully that's a sign that Nick Castellanos is heating up. He has hit some more balls hard during the series in Pittsburgh. He was able to finally hook one of those patented doubles down the left field line, was something that he's been so good at over his career, hooking those balls into left. He had one of those doubles again last night. So again, hopefully a good sign that Nick Castellanos is starting to turn it around, because if the Phillies can get him hot, that would just be a huge, huge help to this lineup. Some injury news and notes to get to for the Phillies. Jean Segura and Sam Coonrod have both started rehab assignments, and they should both be close to coming back. It's rumored that Segura could come back as early as this weekend, perhaps. I think it's more likely that he'll come back next week, maybe next weekend. I just think the Phillies want to get him a little bit more at-bats down in the minor leagues. Of course, he's been out since late May with that hand injury, and I think that once he comes back, he should get back right into the swing of things just because of how good of a hitter he is. Sam Coonrod, the forgotten Philly, I think, by most people, including me, up until just a few weeks ago when it was noted that he was going to be sent down on a rehab assignment. He could be a pretty big help to the Phillies' middle relief. He could really, hopefully at least, replace Jeurys Familia as that guy that maybe comes in when the Phillies are down by a couple of runs or up big, as we saw Thursday night. But he could really replace Familia as that guy. I think, and Coonrod, I mean, he was pretty good for the Phillies last season. He, of course, has that electric fastball. It'll sit about 97 to 100, so again, he would be a pretty big help to the middle relief of the Phillies. Alright, so now let's take a look at the Phillies week ahead. They're going to finish up the series in Pittsburgh. Tonight's game is at 7:15. It's a national TV game on Fox. Tomorrow's game is at 1:35 back on NBC Sports Philadelphia. The Phillies will then have an off day in Atlanta on Monday. Then they'll take on the Braves for 2 on Tuesday and Wednesday. Tuesday's game is at 7:20. Wednesday's game is at 12:20. Both of those games can be seen on NBC Sports Philly. They'll then come home and take on the Nationals for 4 on Thursday. They're going to take on the Nationals at 7:05, NBC Sports Philadelphia. Friday's game is again at 7:05. That game is on Apple TV Plus, so another Apple TV Plus game for the Phillies. Saturday's game, 6:05, Wall of Fame night. That game will be on NBC Sports Philadelphia. And then finally, Sunday's game at 1:35, NBC Sports Philadelphia, and then MLB Network as well for out-of-market only. Alright, and that is going to wrap things up for this edition of the Philly Sports Spot YouTube channel. Again, guys, make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel with notifications turned on so you never miss another upload. I post every Saturday. You could also follow me on Instagram. The link will be in the description below. If you want, you could also just look me up. It's at Philly Sports Spot. That's PhillysSport, just one S between sport and spot. So guys, until next week, have a good week, and let's go Phillies. Let's make a deal, Dave.